All right, all right, all right. Hello, everyone. My name is Nicholas Salter. I'm the host of the Keep It Real podcast. So today's episode, we're going to be going over a little bit on kind of an extension of what we touched upon in the last episode in regards to the four attachment styles. In that episode, I covered what the four attachment styles were, and how one would develop a style, as well as steps to how one can proactively heal it. So now I'm going to be kind of going into an aspect of where I feel a little bit deeper into how these attachment styles, like how they kind of came to be, like what's the true source of that. I know in the last episode I talked about how it was kind of more how you kind of related to your parents, and based on that upbringing will reflect the kind of attachment style that you have, really in regards to unmet needs, right? So in this one we're going to talk about, well, what would those needs be? And basically, if those needs are not adequately met, or if they aren't adequately expressed, it can lead to maladaptive tendencies that can have a serious impact on our relationships or our own self-concept. So, kind of going into it for a little bit, we're going to kind of go into what's known in Jungian psychology as the shadow. The shadow being the aspects, the traits, your thoughts, your beliefs, your feelings that you have truncated, that you have compartmentalized, myself included, and you've kind of stowed away in a part of yourself, so that way you could receive a sense of love and safety and belonging from your caregivers. Basically, there are certain aspects of yourself that you believed that they did not like, that would have impaired your ability to survive, because if you pissed them off, then they could get rid of you or kill you. So as a defenseless child who was very, for lack of better words, kind of narcissistic at that age, to where we believe everything that's happening in the world is due to our ability or due to our impact on it, so to speak. That is why we developed this belief system that, oh man, I need to change myself to make sure that my caregivers won't throw me away, even though it may not have anything to do with us. It may have everything to do with the caregivers or the environment itself. But as a kid, we don't have that reasoning, or as a baby, we don't have that reasoning capability to make that kind of discernment. So therefore, we truncate part of ourselves, not knowing the consequences down the road of doing so. But even then, with the consequences down the road, there's no point in trying to worry about down the road if you can't survive today. So even then, it could have been some level of like, oh, well, this isn't really good for me, but the future doesn't really matter if I can't live to see tomorrow. So therefore, we kind of make the hard call at that age. Again, all this is is intuitive. It's all like instinctual. It's not something that we reasoned through. It's just something that we've internally felt. So therefore, we decided to adopt. And the thing is about it is that it worked at that age. When we're at that age, the reason why we adopt these tendencies and carry these tendencies into our adulthood is because that it was effective. It did its job. It did it probably about at least 70% of the time, which is why we hung on to it. But that's why in psychotherapy it's called a maladaptive behavior, to where it did serve you to a certain point, but now that same behavioral trait or response is no longer serving you in your life or your adult relationships. It's become unhealthy to keep it. So it's kind of did its job, but now you have to start retiring that and kind of shifting to a new paradigm, like a new way of thinking, a new way of being, in order to have more fulfilling and impactful lives and relationships. So kind of going into that a little bit more. An example of a shadow that might be repressed for a big one for people is anger, right? Especially in a socialized society, kind of popping off at the cuff whenever you feel like it is not really welcome for the most part. People do it all the time, but still, we've kind of been domesticated, so to speak, to where we need to pretend that everything's kind of all well and good, or kind of be polite, even though it might be in a bad mood. We've got to kind of save face at work or with our friends or family or things like that. But then that rage kind of gets bottled up inside if there's not a good outlet for it. And that's the thing about repressing things, is that the more you tend to repress, the more toxic it becomes within you. And it leads to different aspects of passive aggression. So this is what happens when the shadow kind of unhealthily kind of takes over in the background, certain parts of your life. It may not realize it. That leads you to do certain behaviors, coping mechanisms, passive aggressive tendencies, forgetfulness, like different things that you'll kind of either use to punish other people in your relationships or punish yourself because you couldn't actually verbalize or express how you really felt. This happens a lot, like even like, let's say like in an office setting to where like, you're supposed to give your boss a report or something. And then you say, oh, I forgot the report. It's like, well, you really didn't forget, or maybe you did forget, but you made yourself forget on purpose because you're trying to get back at your boss for something that you feel like some kind of off comment they gave to you the other day, or whatever the case may be. You basically figure out different ways to let that anger out because it can't stay within us. That's the biggest problem with the shadow stuff, is that we think these parts of ourselves that we don't like, that we can just keep at bay and not suffer any kind of consequence for it, when really we're suffering a consequence just over a longer period of time, subtly sabotaging our life and relationships in the background without us even being aware of it, right? It was also, where I got all this from is from a book called Creative Aggression. Came out back in 1974, real old book. It was written by George Bach and Herb Goldberg, and it talked about how in our civil society, even though it's allowed us to survive, the downside to that is that we've kind of neglected our instincts and how we relate to one another. And because of that, it makes our relationships feel very shallow and surface level, and just kind of empty. Because that's the problem with suppressing that kind of anger all the time, is that that's also the spontaneity in life and your emotions and your conversations. Like, that is an aspect of who you are. So if you reject that aspect, you're not bringing all of who you are to the table. So therefore, you can't really make a genuine connection with people as long as these aspects are being repressed for the most part. Now, let me kind of give a clarification here. That does not mean they get to go out and cuss out somebody else just because they piss you off. That's not what I'm saying. Part of kind of shadow work in therapy is learning how to integrate parts of your shadow into your ego or into your normal, how you view yourself, your self-concept, in order to become a more fully fledged whole human being. So let's say that someone might be a little bit of a people pleaser, a little bit of a doormat. Their shadow side would be expressed as someone that like might be very angry, very domineering, very controlling. And you might notice that a person like this may have a disdain for like bullies. They may have a disdain for very powerful, very extroverted, like very type A individuals. Like they can't stand them because they feel like that they're just bullies, right? But the truth be told, the reason why that individual hates that other individual so much is because they have some of those aspects that they feel like that they can't express themselves. So because they can't express it, they resent anyone else who does. Right. And this also works in a positive sense, too. Like I said, there's someone that you kind of really admire for their outgoing nature, or someone that you really admire for their leadership qualities or things like that. The reason why you really admire those qualities is because you probably share some of the same qualities or same values yourself. And you like those parts of yourself, so therefore you like it being enacted in other people. So it goes both ways, positive and negative. But I really want to focus on the fact of, in order to become a fully fledged human being, we have to learn how to integrate the parts of ourselves, and not just that we like, but also the parts of ourselves that we don't, and try to do it the best we can. Otherwise, the passive aggressive tendencies and coping mechanisms are going to seep out into our day-to-day behavior. So you might say, okay, Nick, so you're basically saying that I need to learn how to accept my anger. Okay, fine. But then how do I actually use that in my interpersonal relationships? Like, where's the actual, like, practical advice here? So from what I've researched, it looks like anger, like emotions, because emotions are not a logical thing. The whole point of emotions is to be expressed. That's how you release them. That's why people cry. That's why people kind of punch things out. That's why people like laugh. It's more just like you're letting it out of your body by expressing it, so you're no longer having that pressure, that weight on you, and it kind of frees you up, so to speak. So basically how to address that would be, in order to address your hidden anger problem, would be to, not make it hidden. So things you can do would be to learn assertiveness training, so learning how to have conflict in conversations. And even then in that conflict, because he's also another, actually, thing I learned from the book as well, is that intellectualizing can also be a way of passive aggressiveness. Like, so let's say like you have a romantic partner, and then they're trying to explain how they feel towards you, and then you're not trying to connect with them, you're just trying to emotionally trying to logically pick apart the problem and solve it. But look, honey, don't worry about it, just solved it. we're done, we're good. It's like, well, even though technically, yeah, you might have solved the problem, which you probably didn't, but let's say you did solve the problem. She still resents you because you didn't actually sit there in the moment with her. You didn't actually make her feel seen. You just kind of feel like you kind of wrote off her feelings because you didn't want to deal with them. That would be a version of intellectualizing, to where it's just like you kind of undercut the real substance of the conversation because you don't want to feel that kind of emotional strain on you, because it might bring up back emotions from childhood of maybe being in a very emotionally turbulent home. So you had to learn how to be kind of cold and rational and logical in order to kind of make sure everyone stays calm, and that way you stay safe and you stay calm. So therefore you kind of truncated off the very emotionally maybe volatile parts of yourself. And now everyone might complain, be like, I don't really understand how you feel, or I feel like I don't really know a lot about you, or you're very closed off or reserved, or it's like, I feel like that you're not very like here, I feel like you lack presence, or I just don't feel a connection, or things like that. Like, you might be hearing things like that a lot because people might be able to pick up on the words you say, but they can't pick up on how you feel. Because you basically truncated that aspect of yourself out because you thought it lacks utility. And maybe it did in your childhood environment. And maybe not emotionally acting out might have saved you from a harsh punishment, might have saved you from like a physical beating or physical harm. So therefore, it did serve a purpose when you were little, but now in trying to form genuine connections with other people, it's now harming you in that sense. So that's where the shadow stuff kind of comes into play on how it's very important, because these are things just kind of running us in our background lives that we may not be aware of, that we try to address the best we can. So I think assertiveness training would be one. Learning how to set boundaries to other people, letting your needs be known, and knowing how to put some vocal intonation on it, kind of letting some emotion see through, like, hey, I'm not okay with the way you did that. Like, being able to actually express what you feel, not just say what you feel. Like, there's a difference between those two. Another thing would be punching a pillow, or going to like a rage room, going to a place in nature and just kind of be able to let out like a primal scream, all that bottled up emotions, all that hate, all that shit, just let it out, that can be like a way to do it. But basically you just have to, because a lot of it's physical too. A lot of the stuff we kind of get trapped like in the body. It might be trapped like in our chest, or like in our throat, in our back even. Like, there's a lot of tension for me in my back, or like my neck area. I feel that's where I hold like a lot of my energy, or whatever you want to call it too. So it's like a lot of it's physical. So even working out, going for like a run, or like lifting weights, just having an outlet. Combat sports is great, like martial arts or boxing, things like that. Just things that you can kind of get in contact, not just like with your body, but also with just the expression of that negative energy. And it's not just anger, it's not just negative. A lot of the reason why we have anger is because we feel like something unjust has been done to us, right? And that's the problem, is that when we're children and in an unjust environment, you can't fight back. So therefore, you stuff down all that anger, but then it shows up in maybe you not studying. Maybe it shows up in you being not that close to your parents and having very short, shallow conversations, or very emotionally distant and just strictly logical conversation with them, because if you step into the realm of emotions, things might get a lot more volatile, which you were trained not to do. So therefore, you just back out of it. But now all relationships feel like they're arm's length, right? So it's like all this stuff, it pops up in other ways. And that's really the big crux of what I'm trying to say here, is that you have it. This shadow aspect of yourself, it's like you're not going to get rid of it, and you haven't been able to get rid of it all your life, and you never will be able to. And you're not supposed to. You're just supposed to learn how to better adopt and integrate these qualities into who you are, to become a fully fledged individual and have a lot more impact on the world and a lot more impact on your relationships. Like a shadow, those bad aspects of yourself is not an indictment of your character. It just means that you are a human being that has flaws. And even some of those flaws by society standards may actually still be useful. Like, there might be someone that might be very quiet and very shy, who their shadow aspect of themselves might be kind of aggressive, but also might be very, very funny. But it also might be very extroverted, may have very strong levels of empathy, that if they allow their shadow side to come out and learn how to integrate it, they'll actually be able to form very strong and healthy connections with other people and help other people feel seen. So it's like your shadow side isn't just evil and all the nasty traits too. It's just traits that you have to repress because your childhood, you felt like in your childhood that they would have gotten you hurt, basically. Which that might have been the case, but now that you're adult and hopefully in a better situation, that doesn't have to be the case anymore. And I'm saying all this for myself, like I'm not trying to preach to the choir here, is that I recognize these aspects in myself too. Going into psychotherapy, reading the book, and recognizing that a a lot of my interactions sometimes feel cold and lifeless, but that's because subconsciously, now I'm realizing consciously that that's what I want. Because if I have that, then people can't hurt me. And then also, by the same token, I can't hurt other people. Because at least for me, I developed a principle of like always trying to do right by others. Because like I love superheroes and shit like that. But the issue with that is that no one is a perfect Boy Scout. Like no one's like, like Superman's an ideological figure. He doesn't exist, and even then he's gone bad a few times. But it's like it's not really a healthy. It's an inhuman ask of someone to be 100% moral and good and not have their own selfish tendencies, their own wants and desires, their own bouts of rage, jealous tendencies or anger. All this stuff is part of the human experience. Now, I just feel like that society hasn't done a good job of learning how to integrate those aspects. And I think that's something that we can do better, not just in the education system, but also in how we raise our kids and how to have a constructive conflict to where emotions can rise, but it won't mean the end of the relationship. Like, I feel like that's why a lot of relationships seem so fragile nowadays. And this is also, I think, another segue to why I think a lot of depression and anxiety is on the rise, is because when you start suppressing things like anger, like things like your connection with other people, that also starts becoming psychosomatic symptoms of like depression, anxiety. It can come up as physical ailments like arthritis, like inflammation in the body, like all of that repression that can raise your cortisol levels and like literally just make you have a heart attack or a stroke at an early age. Like, I think this is part of the reason why dudes die like in their fucking 60s. It's because we've been taught our whole lives to basically kind of be machines and not feel anything and just keep doing our masculine duty or whatever. And then we have a heart attack and die. That's what happens, because we just can't hold on to that energy all our lives. We're not supposed to. We're not built for that. That's not what human beings are. We're not machines. If anything, I feel like that's a level of toxic masculinity, where it's just like we're just pretending we're some kind of cold robots that only does what that we're programmed to do, and that's not the case. So I feel like we need to do a better job of that, of learning how to teach men to be more like not just IQ, but EQ, a level of emotional intelligence, to where it's like, you give them a feelings wheel, be like, all right, are you dealing with feelings of inadequacy? Are you feeling with feelings of, harsh judgment, criticism? Are you feeling with feelings of, just rage, or just feelings of, whatever the case may be? These are the things that we need to make clear to ourselves as well as to trusted people, so we can have healthy outlets of expression, so we don't just blow up. Like, I feel like that, not to be all dark, that this is where things like school shooters and stuff like that, and like murderers, this is where they come from. Or people like on the news would be like, well, I never thought he would do something like that. I was like, yeah, because he's been a ticking time bomb for years. And no one has been able to just cut the shit and be like, hey, dude, stop intellectualizing. How do you actually feel? Like, how are you doing? Like, no one actually kind of gave them that attention to kind of really check in on how their life is. They just been kind of plaster a smile on all these years. Then you suddenly wonder like why they just start to go postal. Like, this is how it happens. We have to do a better job of kind of checking in with people on an authentic level and kind of letting them be people and learning how to hold emotional space for that, which is hard. Again, it's not a logical thing, especially if we weren't raised in an environment that fostered that. It's a skill, I think just how studying and reading and all that stuff is a skill. I think emotional intelligence, learning how to deal with your own emotions and other people's emotions, is also a skill too. It's got to be learned, especially if you're an egghead like me. It's not going to come easy, because you kind of been your whole life being like A plus B equals C. That's all that matters, and it's not. That is definitely an over correction, really. So things like different things like service training, working out, combat sports, things like that kind of help release those repressed emotions. Talking to a trusted person, probably not the caretakers. If you feel like they're the ones you kind of got the emotional wounds from in the first place, you probably want to go to a place that didn't cause that initial emotional trauma in order to get healing from, just to avoid any further emotional trauma. Just saying, not to say you can't circle back around to the caregivers, but they probably shouldn't be your first stop in terms of dealing with this stuff. If they are part of the reason, at least that you feel like they're part of the reason why you are the way you are currently. But I think, and also another thing too, is that I didn't know that these shadow elements can lead us to things like cognitive distortions and shortcuts in our thinking. Like, I would have a habit of trying to pre-script out my conversations I have with other people, just trying to make sure that I come off in the best way, in the best light possible, trying to make sure I don't displease anybody. Honestly, that's really what people pleasing is. It's not really people pleasing, it's more like trying to avoid displeasing people. So I would try to like rehearse conversations ahead of time in my head to try to preempt the conflict out of them, or select my word choice very carefully. But it always feels like I'm always towing the line, like, you know, in conversations, so to speak. So therefore they feel kind of stale, unless I really know somebody. I know them for years, and then I'm not really worried about that. But like that's what can happen. It's like you get so focused on your perception, how you perceive by the other person, that you're not a dick, that you siphon any kind of life and emotional connection out of that interaction by doing so. Like you intellectualize it to the ground, essentially, to where it's like, hey, no negative emotions pop up, great, but then no positive emotions pop up either. That's the catch-22. That's the thing. Same thing goes with repressing your emotions or keeping people out. It's like, well, yeah, no one can hurt you if you just become a social loner and keep people out, but then no one can really love you either. That's also a very lonely, a very painful existence in of itself. Like that's not really, like you feel like that might be a better deal, and it's really not. It's just a different way of hurting yourself. You can't really avoid pain in life. Like just like a segue, like, you know, in this life you will have trouble. Just it is what it is. So you're going to have pain, whether you're alone or you deal with people. People are going to let you down or betray you, whatever the case may be. And being always by yourself all the time is a great way of being in emotional turmoil and not really having a good reflection of who you are, because we need other people to kind of help reflect that back to us. And otherwise we'll become lost in search of our own identities and purpose and things like that. So we need other people, period. So instead of trying to run away from that or trying to control other people, the best way to do would be learning how to authentically express who you are and letting them authentically express who they are, and figure out if you should be in each other's lives or not. And if you're not, then it's good. I mean, it's not an indictment of your character or you. It's just saying that like you guys aren't a good match, whether platonically, relationship wise, or just it is what it is. But I think, this is really important. I feel like in society, a lot of our problems, especially when it comes to mental health in our youth, is coming from the fact that we just don't know how to interact with each other anymore. We use social media and technology and other really facsimiles of communication instead of actually genuinely looking each other in the eyes and letting it be known how we feel internally. Because that feels like, I mean, for some people, it's like a death sentence. That's why a lot of people struggle with eye contact, because eyes are the windows to the soul, right? So if you look someone in the eyes, you feel like they can see all your insecurities, all the things you don't like about yourself. Like, you kind of want to hide. So therefore, you look down, you look off to the left, you never really look in the eyes, at least not for too long. It's like you're always kind of looking away, so you feel like they can't see your flaws or see what's wrong with you. But in doing so, they can't really feel or get a gauge of who you are. So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy of you just creating the same cycle of loneliness that you've been experiencing. So a lot of this stuff, I feel like, it's unfortunate that it hasn't been taught, because I think there's a lot of people in pain in the world right now that didn't understand that this is what's affecting them adversely, and they're just wondering why they're getting the same results they are in relationships, or like how can they getting passed up in their jobs for their promotions, or like how can they feel like they don't get invited out to anything or any parties, or they have no close friends or family members check in on them. They live a very lonely existence because they never let it be known how they feel. Because to let other people know how you feel is to let them know who you are. And that can be dangerous because you can't trust everybody. And some people will hurt you. But if you don't do that, I feel like you're also just in much danger of becoming a person that commits atrocities, kind of bring down a village to feel its warmth kind of thing. Or you turn that anger against yourself, and it turns into some kind of psychosomatic fucking tumor, or cancer, arthritis, or self-harm, anxiety, depression, all that stuff. It's like the anger has to go somewhere. The life energy has to go somewhere. So if you don't share it and put it internally in a positive manner, you'll do it in a negative manner, out of your control, or you'll turn it against yourself. So it's not really negotiation, not really discussion to be had. Is that like if you're not constantly aware of this stuff, it will run you in the background for the rest of your life. And it'll keep leading you to the same relationships, to the same pain, if the pattern is not recognized. So like always, I recommend psychotherapy, or talk to a professional about this. Maybe have a trusted loved one or a friend. Again, not the person that caused the attachment issues or things like that in the first place, but a different figure that you trust, to kind of run some of this stuff by, just so that way, really the big thing about emotions is that they have to be seen. You know, you have to feel seen. That's the whole point of human connection in the first place, is to feel seen and recognized, right? And that's why the opposite of being seen is a feeling of shame. where, there's guilt and there's shame, right? Guilt is where like, oh, I did an action, I did a bad action, and that action is bad, but I can change my behavior, and the guilt is meant to incentivize you to change that behavior. And then there's shame, to where it's like, no, I'm bad, I'm wrong, I need to change. And that's what happens with the shadow self, and that's how the shadow self develops, is from toxic shame, from that belief of there's something wrong with me that I picked up from my caregivers, so therefore I must change and compartmentalize who I am, and it creates all this other adverse side effects and shadow self that you have to deal with down the line. So a lot of people have drinking problems, gambling problems, problems like with lust and pornography, all those other things. Like, it all comes from that space of like, you didn't feel like you were good enough when you were a kid, so now you're trying to figure out ways to make up for that and coping with your relationships as an adult. That's where it comes from. The good news is that now you're an adult, you can learn how to parent yourself, how to love yourself, how to set your own boundaries, how to take care of yourself and your own needs, and then hopefully kind of teach other people in your life how to do the same thing. And you can start reshaping and reforming healthy human relationships one at a time. And have relationships that have, vitality, that have energy to them, dude. Like, a lot of couples that have like dead bedroom situations, I feel like this always happens like around like the 10-year mark or whatever, at least from what I've read online, is that like they get in a level of complacency because they let all the little things in their relationship and their marriage like kind of pile up over time until it blows up into infidelity, until it blows up into like domestic violence, until it blows up into like finance issues and then gambling problems. It's like when we don't have those little fights and like letting people know how we feel about something or how to set a boundary on something and be like, or just have that honest human expression and connection, when we don't have those moments, it blows up and it snowballs into something catastrophic. So really having those fights, being like, hey, I didn't appreciate the way you do that. It's like, what the fuck's your problem? Like, again, well, this is the total line thing here, is like you have to watch how you do it, but you shouldn't hide your feelings either. You know what I mean? Like, you should let them know if you're fucking pissed about something. Let them know that you're pissed. But you should do it in a way that's more reflective of, this is how I'm feeling, not more of like, this is an indictment of your character. It should be more of like, I'm just expressing, I'm not targeting you. That's the difference. To where it's like, because targeting someone can be like you're trying to make them feel bad, so you kind of get revenge, like a tit for tat thing. But anger is more like, no, you did this unjust thing to me, and I'm furious at you from this result. Like, I feel like it's a little bit more of like a defensive anger than like an offensive anger, if that kind of makes sense. Like, it should be because something was kind of done wrong to you that kind of bothers you, not because you're trying to one up the other person. Like, where's the intentionality from the anger coming from? I think it's a big thing that kind of comes there. And it's hard, because here's the thing about emotions, when emotions start flying, is that people are going to get hurt. That people are people. So there's no perfect way to give out your emotions to where nobody gets hurt. You're probably going to get offended, or the other party's probably going to get offended. But really, that's what makes the relationship deeper, is that as you work out the problems, as you finally get them out on the table and have that honest dialogue, honest expression, to where, yeah, truth hurts and it's told, but from there, you actually have a way forward that you guys can navigate with. And you feel closer together because you recognize that, oh, the other person's not fragile. I can actually show them who I am and what I really feel. Oh, and then I'm not fragile. I can take a lot more hits than I thought I could. And then that trust deepens when you recognize that y'all can really be that real with one another. And then a lot more fun can be had, because then you can bring more who you are to the table. It's like, or when you have an argument, something like that, the whole relationship or whole marriage is not going to blow up, because that argument contains 13,000 other arguments that you guys haven't had yet, so therefore the whole thing combusts. It's like, because you've done your due diligence, so to speak, of having the honest interactions over time, now it's just like whenever you have like a normal fighting relationship, it's just like, oh yeah, sometimes you fight about this. It's not a big deal. Your relationship can survive the little stuff, and therefore it'll probably survive the big stuff, because you've had several years of practice doing the little stuff. So that's really what it is. Like really reading that book, and I highly recommend people read that book if they can. Creative Regression really kind of changed my outlet on human relating, because I used to think that consciously I figured out that you shouldn't avoid conflict like years ago, but now I think emotionally I'm really starting to pick up on it. I'm really starting to kind of feel it like in here. It's hard to explain, but it's like I used to think that having conflict with other people should be avoided at all costs, but now I recognize that when you avoid conflict with other people, you're also avoiding connection. Like, that's when I'm realizing how life works. Like, just like with depression or just repressing anything, is that whenever you try to repress just the negative emotions, you're also repressing the positive ones too. So when you're trying to avoid fights with people, you're also avoiding chances for people to get to really love you and connect with you and get to know who you are as well. Like, you can't have one without the other. When you turn off the faucet, all the water stops. When you try to go through your life trying to walk on eggshells and tiptoe around you, it's like, yeah, you're not pissing anyone off, I guess, but then you're not really giving anyone the chance to love you either, or for you to love somebody else. All your relationships are just fake and shallow, to where it's like, yeah, I guess you're not in pain, at least not from the external world, but you're in pain in the internal world from loneliness and not being seen, which I don't think that's a better fate. I don't think that's a better way to live life, honestly. Which is why I'm trying to change too. And it takes time. I mean, you're not gonna make a change in a day, but I think with conscious effort and awareness of this problem over time, and just, practicing things like assertiveness training, practice things like having honest dialogue and conflict, kind of letting more of your emotions out, more of your humanity out, more of your not so shiny, refined side out, that allows you to have deeper connections with people, which you might lose some once you start changing, and people may stop taking advantage of you because they recognize that they're not just going to take it anymore. Some relationships may change fundamentally, but I think that's a good thing, because if they do change, then that means you probably weren't supposed to have them in the first place. The way if you got them in ill-gotten relationships, you're going to lose them because you're not supposed to have them. So I think, and then that'll actually leave room for the people that are supposed to be in your life. So I think it's a change and it's a sacrifice, and people might try to tell you to kind of go back in the bottle, or no, this isn't you, like, you shouldn't try to do all this stuff. It's like, well, no, because if things were going well, you wouldn't be looking at stuff like this or trying to change in the first place. So obviously it is important, and the change needs to happen, but just do the change in a way that you can actually kind of keep up with over time and not overwhelm yourself, and don't become like a fucking asshole, tyrannical prick like Andrew Tate type. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that you don't have to take people's shit if you don't want to. Be like, all right, look, you're not gonna talk to me that way. If you keep doing that, we're done. I'm not talking to you ever again. It's like you don't have to be like a glorifying prick about it. Just be honest, be transparent, and then just have that be that. Have your word be your word, and people probably give you a lot more respect for doing that than trying to pretend to be some grandiose bully or being a doormat. Because both of these are lies. They're just lies on opposite sides of the spectrum. But yeah, I feel like that's the big crux of the topic that I kind of want to talk about today. I didn't want to kind of belabor the point, but I think that if we as a society can try to learn how to be okay with people being angry at each other and having conflict, as long as reasonable conflict, like can't go around killing each other or hurting each other, right? But letting some words be said, letting some emotionality out, being able to honestly and thoughtfully express and having that argument, with your significant other, and just putting boundaries on the argument, being like, hey, we're not going to talk about this and this because these are really personal issues, but everything else on the table, we can have at it, and just kind of set up like a safe space to have that argument, so that way that those emotions can come out, so you guys can kind of grow closer together as a couple. I think that's important. I feel like that's what most therapy is, especially when couples care therapy. When they get to that point, it's just more like it's time for them to have the fights that they should have been having all their marriage, that they've been avoiding. And now suddenly, because they're able to get angry at each other, they're able to be emotionally and passionate with one another, all of a sudden they're a lot more cuddly. Sex lives gotten a lot better. Like now they're going out to dinner more, they're laughing around each other more. It's like they're having a great time. It's like, yes, because you let humanity back in a relationship. You don't have this fake guise of niceness and politeness on your face where it's like, yeah, everything's fine. Well, it's not fucking fine. You had a fucking terrible day. Fucking, I hate it here. It's like, it's like people bond a lot better with that level of authenticity than this level of fake niceness that we know that we're always kind of bullshitting anyway. And it's like, we all hate it. So why the fuck do we keep doing it? So stop it. Cut the shit. But I think if we start working on that on a societal level, I think our relationships will start becoming a lot more deeper. Our connections with each other will start becoming a lot more deeper. And therefore, a lot more of the psychosomatic ailments will stop going away. A lot of the depression, a lot of the loneliness. Because I think the social anxiety comes from the fact that the brain is trying to keep us safe from other people, from being hurt by them, right? So by making you feel a fear, it keeps you away from people. So therefore, you're not able to be emotionally abandoned by them or emotionally neglected like them. Maybe similar like to how you were in childhood. See how that works? So basically, you kind of have to fight that pre-programming and kind of go into it and learn how to have those uncomfortable conversations and sit in the uncomfortability of being human. And in doing so, you'll learn how to be comfortable being human and have human relationships, and your life will light up and you'll be a lot better, and you feel a lot better. You feel a lot more connected with people. I feel a little more connected with people now in my life, which is fucking great. And yeah, things might get a little messy. Relationships might always get a little bit messy, but that's the price of dealing with people, is that life's going to be a little messy sometimes. But here's the great news is that you're not fragile. You can take it. And when you decide to take it, your life will change and turn for the better. I truly believe that. So I think that's all I want to say on this topic. I can always do another episode if I want to go into this a little bit deeper, or like another example comes to mind for right now, but I feel like I basically kind of gotten a good point across. Essentially, again, the whole crux of the podcast, be real with one another. Even if the realness is a little bit ugly, I think people will appreciate the sincerity. And, you don't know, future telling, it's a cognitive distortion. You don't know what's going to happen, what's going to take place. If you bring who you are authentically to the table, the best thing might just happen to you. So I say take a chance and start making some changes in your life and your relationships, and I believe you won't regret it. I truly believe you won't. But yeah, leave the comments on what you feel about the video. Again, trying to plan for a couple more guests to come on here. I feel like everyone's just kind of, it's kind of tied up right now. Just that kind of season, springtime, so I was kind of busy. But yeah, until next time, hope you guys stay well. Let me know how you like the episode, and keep it real. Thanks, everybody.